Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, how you doing, everybody? What a day. It is Wednesday, December 16th, 2020, and how's your morning going? Mine's been a bit of chaos. Wow, and it even sounds like the levels on my microphone aren't that hot either. Is everything okay coming through? Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. We'll see. Okay, levels 5 by 5. You say so, I'll believe it. Okay, let's see. How do I even describe what's going on here in the morning? Oh, okay. First of all, make sure I get my alarms set here. Everything is way back and behind today, and the usual intro music was a little screwed up as well as I got to the desk late. I guess long-ish, story short. I guess we can do it pretty quickly and easily, but it'll require some additional explanation. We keep a Christmas tree in this house. I bet you didn't know that. That's probably strikes you as odd, or maybe not, because I'm Jewish, and I've said so. And, well, my wife's not. So as a continuance of her favorite holiday traditions, we keep a Christmas tree here. And, it's fun to have, and it smells good and looks nice. And it's always an adventure going to get it. To put it mildly, I guess. And so now we have it, and we haven't I'm surprised we haven't had this problem before, quite honestly. Anyway, weirdly, this year, the Christmas trees came in 2 sizes, extra small and extra large, for whatever reason. In our area, that's what reached us. And we went with the extra large option. And it's not that much larger than the ones we've had in the past, but it's a little larger. And they're also heavier. I don't know, they're denser, something wider as well. So they were quite difficult to manage this year, although I did note also for the record, it was very difficult to maneuver the thing around and to carry it, more difficult than it's ever been in the past. I at first blamed it on the larger trees. Then, of course, I realized we've had 2 abdominal surgeries this terrific 2020, so maybe that has something to do with it as well. Anyway, it's an enormously heavy tree and was very difficult to get in the door and stood upright, and we had difficulty getting it in the tree stand correctly, and it looks to be a little lopsided as well, so we're trying to correct for that. Anyway, come down in the morning where there's not a whole lot of time to get everything done in preparation for the show, to find the tree fallen over, and luckily it's fallen very intelligently and didn't smash anything on the way down, but of course it spilled all of its water all over the place, and that means sopping it up off of the area rug and worrying about the hardwood floors underneath. But luckily the planning took care of that. So far, the rug mat has absorbed a lot of it, and of course, the tree skirt is a waterproof thing, and that's good, and, whatever. So it's drying out, but in an effort to try and salvage things, I tried picking everything up, trying to get it stood back up today, but it's going to require some extra work on that. It's going to require to let things dry out under where the tree was. And, of course, my hands are now covered in pine sap, and I can't touch the damn computer in order to work it to run the show. So it's a hell of a day. So I'm running things kind of left-handed and with 3 of the fingers, and not the good ones. And, we'll see how much of this works. In the meantime, the country's going to hell. And it's a race against time to get the tree stood up fast enough to put some water into the stand so that it doesn't dry out and die during the show. So, it's a fun day. The joys of the holiday season are upon us. Greg Dworkin, I'm sure, has the same problem every year. But it's been fun, and it has really interrupted things. And then I have a dentist appointment after the show, so that'll really make things go smoothly. A little bit of drilling and filling when this is all done. And happy holidays to everyone. So, it's a hell of a start. The country's in worse shape than my house, so there's plenty to talk about. If it's not happy news, I can't help you with that. All right, so, happy holidays and all that. Good morning, Greg. How are you today?
Good morning. I'm left-handed, so maybe I can help.
Oh, Good. Well, you can run the show then. I'll send you my mouse. I'm wary of these beautifully designed Apple products. That I'm very wary of getting pine sap all over them and trying to figure out whether I can remove it without damaging the electronics inside.
Well,
but they look
there's
good
probably
while
an attachment for that, so you're okay.
Yes, I'm sure there's some sort of app somewhere. Right. And an extension for Firefox.
Yeah, get the app for making maple syrup, and it should take care of it.
Yeah, if you can make pine syrup, we're in good shape. But I don't know how it's going to taste.
So we should be in good shape. There is plenty of good news. First of all,
good.
One of the things I noticed about yesterday is that there wasn't that much Trump news, and there was a whole lot of Biden news, and that was something I could really get quite used to quite fast.
Yeah, he'll be president, so. I'm predicting a lot more Biden attention.
It's going to be more boring, and that's okay.
Yeah, I could use that.
In fact, that's a theme that we'll get into in a bit.
All right.
In fact,
boredom.
Margaret Sullivan has a piece on that. Journalist, it's time for a cold turkey breakup with Trump.
Okay.
Right. The relationship is bumpy, sometimes abusive. Scum, he called us early on, referring to journalists. Yes. But Trump commanded attention nearly every hour of every day. What new insult? What new outrageous policy? What new threat to democracy? And the paradoxical reality couldn't be denied. Although he trashed us, he helped us. Cable ratings skyrocketed, newspaper subscriptions soared, podcasters never had to scrounge for topics.
True, right.
Media columnists were busy too, and there was even an inside the industry name for this audience increase. It was called the Trump bump. And in 2018, Michelle Wolf said at the White House Correspondents Association dinner, you act like you hate him, but I think you really love him. You helped create this monster, and now you're profiting off of him. But, the party needs to end, she says. It's interesting because there was also a report, I think it was in the New York Times, about MSNBC and CNN, top executives and media figures meeting to try to figure out what now. And then there was a quote from an unnamed source at MSNBC. What happens now that they don't need us?
Yeah.
Well, nothing.
Okay.
We didn't need you and nothing. It was great to have you. It was wonderful to cover this stuff. Or as Margaret Sullivan says, breaking up is hard to do. And this one's going to hurt more than most because Biden is no ball of fire. He stays on script. He rarely goes on the attack. He seems interested in bringing citizens together. The most boring human being I've ever seen, as the current Oval Office occupant put it in his usual tactful way. And, of course, some of the attention will shift by itself. For example, we got a new story this morning.
Yes.
All right, which has, a different spin. Congressional leaders, this is the big news breaking this morning, congressional leaders near deal on COVID relief. The two most common contentious items have been left out. That is to say, there's no shielding of industry for betting on their employees as to who's going to get sick first or how many. And there's no state and local relief. So Republicans and Democrats give that up in order to try to achieve a deal. Democrats promise they have state and local relief planned in other ways. And also the government needs to stop shutting down by Friday. So there's a bunch of stuff that needs to be done in the next 2 days. There will be direct checks. The price tag of the emerging deal is nearly $900 billion. The deal could be finalized as early as this morning. The direct checks will likely be far less than $1,200 per person in order to keep the cost of the bill in check.
Why?
Trump wants to send out checks and has backing from liberals. The negotiations move rapidly. And funding for state and local governments and a liability shield for businesses have been left out. And negotiators on the Democratic side say they've secured other aid to states in the bill, and Republicans have vowed to fight for a liability shield and Democrats for more state and local aid next year. So it'll be different under Biden, and of course that Georgia election matters. I presume that McConnell will go along with it because he thinks it'll help Loeffler and Perdue. I don't know that anything will help Loeffler and Perdue. They're still crooks, even if the well-delayed but eventual COVID relief happens. It doesn't necessarily redound to Kelly Loeffler's credit, for example.
No, not much does.
We have polling.
Oh.
Actually have polling on that race, and the two races. And, this is, I put it in the pundit roundup, of course, a disclaimer, a public service announcement. Use polls wisely. They're not toys. Focus when you read them. Don't be distracted. Follow all polling signals. Poll safely. Do not drink and poll. But essentially, the two races are tied. Interesting results. Let me just give them to you. Let's start with December 7th. From December 7th on to now. Okay. U.S. Senate, Georgia, data for progress. Warnock +3, Perdue +2. December 11th, U.S. Senate, Fabrizio, Ward, Hart. So they have both Democratic and Republican pollsters there. Warnock +1, Ossoff +2. U.S. Senate, Georgia, Trafalgar Group, Loeffler +3, Ossoff and Perdue even. Remember, that's the one where you have to add 5 to get the actual result.
Oh, yeah, right.
U.S. Senate, Georgia, from yesterday, Insider Advantage. Loeffler +1, Perdue +1. That's a Republican-leaning poll. Essentially, they're all tied. Polls tell you what you need to know here, which is to say there were really close races that we can win on both. By the way, if you're wondering about how Georgia polling did in 2020, they did fabulously. They predicted a 1.2% Biden win. It was an actual 0.2% Biden win. So polling in Georgia has been relatively accurate. It's easier to poll Georgia than, let's say, New Hampshire or Michigan or Wisconsin, apparently.
Or
Idaho. Or pick just about anybody else. Some polls are accurate at state level. This was one of the ones where people did a reasonably good job. And so, again, these are elections they could win, but these are elections we could win. And if it's that close, a little thing like whether or not you get COVID relief could possibly make a difference. On the other hand, the party fratricide continues, and Trump still takes shots, as he did yesterday, at Brian Kemp, the governor, and Brad Raffensperger, the Secretary of State. And so you have a divided Republican Party and a united Democratic Party, and that bodes well. We know that early voting started yesterday or Monday, and yesterday's reported results, record-shattering numbers. 168,000 vote in person on the first day, up from 136,000 on day one of in-person early voting. Although there was some in-person early voting problems on day one in Georgia for the general election. But still, a lot of people are showing up. What does that mean? We don't know. Large turnout means everybody votes. That means their side votes, our side votes. Typically, Georgia is one of those states where you might call it a 30-30 goal.
All right.
You want 30% of the electorate to be black. You want to get 30% of the white vote. If you do that, you have a chance to win.
Oh. Huh. Okay. Never really heard it put that way.
So,
Or maybe I have, and I've forgotten.
Well, that's Georgia.
But I'm glad you've put it that way. All right. Thank you.
So, easy to remember.
Okay.
Other things that are happening, Brexit is happening in the UK, and it's not going well. Here's a joke floating around. How do you set up a conservative with a small business? You give him a big one. You then wait.
You don't even have to add water.
And that comes from a financial thing. We have the water. You can add water.
Yeah, wow.
You save some. So Financial Times says the UK has actually ended up with a free trade area smaller than the United Kingdom. In other words, the whole idea of Brexit, we'll go into this Brexit and we'll wind up with a free trade area 10 times bigger than what we have now. Actually, it's smaller than the country because it doesn't include the Irish issue, since they can't really figure out what to do with the border there.
Yeah.
So they're having issues. We're having issues. Theirs are going to continue and get worse. Ours, we think, are going to get better. And then, of course, the huge big story of the vaccine starting to go in people's arms. A lot of my doctor friends tell me that if they haven't gotten vaccinated yet, they have scheduled to do so within the next week. I hear from the pharmacies that seniors like me ought to be able to get vaccinated by the end of March. So that's just a couple of months away.
Okay.
And then everybody else after
Springtime.
that. So that's all good. And I think going forward, we're looking at some positive things. 2021 is just simply going to be a better year than 2020.
Coming up roses.
Early Christmas for historically black colleges and universities. Mackenzie Scott, Jeff Bezos's ex, who's a billionaire in her own right, made about $30 billion this year and is giving $4 billion of it away.
Man,
she's donated to 384 organizations, including HBCUs, Alcorn, Bowie, Claflin, CAU, Delaware State, Dillard, ECSU, Lincoln, Morgan, Norfolk, PVAMU,
Why
Tougaloo,
not?
VSU, WSSU. They're all getting money.
They got a lot of U's.
No strings
U's are all getting
attached.
money. Cool. That's nice.
Right? So that's all
well, not
so
all $4 billion
that's
to
in time
them,
for
but
Christmas.
okay.
Okay, here's some other good news. Looking at the ratings here from TV Newser from Adweek. Monday, December 14th, scoreboard. CNN finishes number 1 in total day, boosted by special coverage of the Electoral College vote, because people really did do Schoolhouse Rock, and they actually watched it.
It's a good idea.
Well, you suggested it, and they listened to your suggestion. But here's the interesting part.
Do I get $1 billion?
I don't
Let's
know.
see
For
other
the
person.
25 to 54-year-old demographic, which is the prized one, they're the folks who spend money.
Yeah. Did they watch that?
Well, I'm looking at the evening ratings.
No. Okay. All right.
Okay.
Evening.
All right. And Tucker Carlson had 544, Chris Hayes 427, Anderson Cooper 717. So Carlson finishes behind Cooper. At 9 p.m. Hannity. Okay.
Yeah.
Rachel gets 640. Chris Cuomo gets 549. Hannity gets 436. So he's last in that demo.
His
Ingram
demographic is
or
asleep.
Ingram next 10 p.m. So these are the white power hours, 3 in a row.
Okay. I got you.
Lawrence O'Donnell, 395. Lemon over at Don Lemon over at CNN, 492.
Okay.
And Ingram, 369.
Hey. All right.
So Hannity and Ingram finished last in the demo that spends money. Right?
Well, yeah.
Also, they were last at 11 p.m.
All right.
And in total viewers, which is different than the younger demo that spends money, still, Maddow beats Hannity and O'Donnell beats Ingram.
Okay. Sure. I think we had to figure as much, but it's nice to see.
Cuomo and Lemon come in actually after them. So the point is that Hannity and Ingram aren't doing gangbusters. In fact, they're losing to newsbusters. So, it's just one of those things that you can talk about how MSNBC is struggling with what to do after Trump is gone. But the fact of the matter is that the worst of the firebrands are actually not doing so well right now.
Okay.
So, again, there's a lot of good news coming in 2021. This is all part of it. Fox News isn't doing as well as they would. Do they change their approach based on ratings? Let's hope so. Are they going to get pushed further to the right by places like Newsmax? Maybe. Just like, the NRA gets pushed by even further to the right gun groups. But at the same time, it's good for the NRA to lose power. It's good for Fox to lose power. So that's all excellent. That's all part of what do you do in the post-Trump era when you are the press.
Yes. They might lose power today.
Right.
I mean, with the snow.
We have this one, which caught my eye. It's not good, but it's never good. It just caught my eye. It's Mark Thiessen writing in the Washington Post. Giving Trump credit for the vaccine is the best way for Biden to unite the country. Now, I can't think of a less credible columnist than Thiessen.
Yeah.
But admitting that Biden is winning and trying to salvage what you can of the Trump scare quotes legacy, unquote, is an interesting approach. Of course, my friend Mike, the mad biologist, wrote back on November 10th, it's time for Republicans to reach out and begin healing the nation, because it's, every single time something like this happens, it's up to Democrats to somehow fix things. It's Democrats who have to reach out. It's Democrats who have to do all the work of healing the country. How about Republicans do it this time?
Well,
how about it's time for Republicans to reach out and be nice to people?
They don't know how to do work.
Right.
But, okay, everyone else who works for them should go and do these things.
So Mike says, this time around, Republicans should be the one to moderate, who manage the emotions, because ours are a little raw right now. So what do they give up? And no, well, we won't be overtly bigoted or support a-holes like Trump. No, that's not enough.
Oh.
That doesn't even get you
a good
to the
start.
door. How about supporting a $15 per hour minimum wage? Let Democrats appoint the next Supreme Court justice. What do you give? Give something. It's supposed to be the party of personal responsibility. How about we start seeing it? So, Thiessen can go suck eggs.
Okay. You like eggs,
Let's
Mark?
talk about reality. It's, he put together the vaccine so he gets all the credit in the world. Here's the real story.
Okay.
Okay. Here's two that I think are worth telling. One is New York Times. The other is AP. The New York Times version. Like a hand-grasping, Trump appointees described the crushing of the CDC. Kyle McGowan, former chief of staff at the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and his deputy, Amanda Campbell, go public on the Trump administration's manipulation of the agency. And basically, it was a slow burn. It was one of those frog boil things. It wasn't any one thing. It wasn't the day they took over. It's that everything started to be argued about. You started to push back on the science, the scientific publications. You're not paying enough attention to the economics of this. You can't just tell restaurants to socially distance at 6 feet. It's going to hurt their bottom line. Just tell them to socially distance and lose the 6 feet advice. Stuff like that actually happened, and it got in there. And so, it's one of the reasons why CDC stopped being credible. Again, I hate to say it, it was a premier world-class agency at one point. I saw under Julie Gerberding and George W. Bush how it could lose credibility, but that's far less than what happened this time. So there's an awful lot of rebuilding that needs to happen. But it isn't just CDC and federal level. This piece in AP, pandemic backlash jeopardizes public health powers and leaders, and tells the story of a little place, Lynn County, Kansas, where Tisha Coleman's lived for 42 years. Close-knit community, but she's never felt so alone because she's the public health administrator, and she's trying to keep a rural county along the Missouri border safe. In this community with no hospital, she's failed to persuade her neighbors to wear masks and take precautions. Even as cases rise, and in return, she's been harassed, sued, vilified, and called a Democrat, which in her circles is an insult.
Gee whiz, okay.
Even her husband doesn't listen, refusing to require customers to wear masks in the family's hardware store. People have shown their true colors, she said. I'm sure I've lost some friends over this. And then, of course, people she know got it and died. And then what happens? Backlash. And then people started screaming at her. And Lawrence Gostin, an expert in public health at Georgetown, says what we've taken for granted for 100 years in public health is now very much in doubt. Further erosion of the nation's already fragile public health infrastructure. At least 180 state and local public health leaders in 38 states have resigned, retired, or been fired since April 1st. According to experts, that's the largest exodus of public health leaders in American history. An untold number of lower-level staffers have also left. So when you're looking at the Bush legacy, and if you're looking at people like Mark Thiessen trying to make a big deal of how he pushed the virus vaccine through all on his own, no.
That's a good point, right? The larger public health question, how did you do in public health during a pandemic, is... Well, some very, large pharmaceutical companies did develop a product in exchange for lots of money, and then all the people who help us stay healthy left.
Right. I've never seen or studied a pandemic that has been as politicized, as vitriolic, and as challenged as this one. And I've studied a lot of epidemics, said Dr. Howard Markel. He certainly has. He's an expert in 1918, a medical historian at the University of Michigan. All of that has been very demoralizing for the men and women who don't make a great deal of money and don't get a lot of fame but work 24/7. And again, back in 2008, 2009, one of the pitches I was trying to make to Mike Levitt and the HHS folks and CDC folks is that since you try to stay apolitical, the end result hasn't been successful. What you've done is created a situation where you have no constituency. So when it comes time for money or support or defense of stuff that happens, you got nobody.
That is
nobody will stand up for you. And so you're at risk, and especially at local levels, that was an era where some Midwestern plains states who think they know better than anybody else were actually trying to get rid of their departments of public health and fold it into some other agency. As if restaurant safety and all the other things that public health does, somehow doesn't matter. And now that we're in the middle of a pandemic, it's odd to believe, but hard to believe, but it's worse because people not only get their money taken away, their lives get threatened.
Yes, true. It is happening, and it's been interesting watching the people it's happening to. I just happened to see this morning Amanda Marcotte making an interesting point about maybe including officials like this one who are Republicans who are saying, I don't feel safe in I can't perform my job anymore. I don't feel safe. People are threatening me. And as she was pointing out, it's sometimes difficult to feel a whole lot of sympathy for Republicans in this position when they have been a part of a party that's made it a norm and even encouraged threats like this over when the issue was abortion over other people. But now it's their term in the hot seat, and guess what? They don't like it, and they think it's uncivil and ought not to be allowed.
Well, she made another point that matches what Mike the Mad Biologist was saying, which is that, so all of a sudden Democrats are the ones that are supposed to reach out and make everything okay. It's like an abusive marriage where it's the wife that always has to fix things, not the husband.
Yeah, we've been through this. We'll save you. We know how it happens. Okay. Yeah, well.
So, this time Democrats are the ones that have to ride to the rescue and rescue the country as if Republicans have no responsibility here. So, it's all part and parcel of the same piece. They screwed up badly, and what's happening now is it's sort of being uncovered, and people are kind of catching on a little bit to what's going on.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing. Again, going forward, 2021 looks better than 2020 for a whole lot of reasons, and this is one of them. But you have to support your local departments of public health, and you have to make sure locally, if it comes up in a funding bill or issue or referendum or however your particular area does it, they do need some political support because they don't have it. And without them, you have what we have now, which is, people dying.
Yes, and chaos, which is, of course, what the Trump folks were hoping for in the first place.
Right.
They're a lovely bunch.
So meanwhile, Donald Trump tells Mitch McConnell it's too soon to give up after the GOP yesterday. After the GOP leader finally recognizes that Biden won. So that's where we're at.
So he got yelled at. I figured he would, but I don't think he cares very much. He's not paying a lot of attention.
He cares
to Trump
about Georgia, and that's why this bill may matter, because if it helps Georgia in terms of the Republican race, Mitch will do it.
Right. Well, good. You got to leverage that when you can. Trump including, and Loeffler, by the way, also not giving up. We can talk about that later. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. It's that time again. Here we go.
It's Wednesday. What's the difference between a trademark and a copyright?
Oh, okay. You want to do that? I don't know if we can fit it into the hour.
You promised me you were going to tell me.
Well, okay. I didn't prepare.
Because us non-lawyers throw this stuff around all the time, and TM, and we don't really know what it means.
Right. Well, let's see. A copyright is, of course... Well, let's see. What's the best way to describe it? I should have gone back to the textbooks on this one. The copyright, of course, has to do with, I think, maybe the best way to describe it has to do with the content that you are protecting, and it's for longer form content. A trademark is just a mark to indicate ownership of something. Copyright is, of course, the ownership itself.
A logo would be a trademark.
Yes,
but
you would not
writing
copyright
a story
that.
would be a copyright.
Yes, that's the basic application of it. You can copyright things in all forms and all sorts of media. But yes, a longer form protection of ownership of content, whereas trademark is really for, like you said, logo or logo type, or
so that means
indicating who owns it.
That means
my
trademark,
symbol,
7,000 word think piece is really a copyright.
Yes, that would be a copyright thing. That would be an extraordinarily long slogan or logo.
Right, my trademark long slogan is actually a copyright. Whereas,
right, and then there's also the additional function is that a properly.
So cartoonists do copyrights or trademarks.
They would trademark perhaps their characters, but copyright the content of their cartoons.
And there you have it. So everybody understands the difference, because cartoons are small and self-contained, and you'd think they'd be a trademark, but no, because it's an image, but no, it's a copyright.
True. But yes, and they could have both copyright and trademark in the characters themselves, interestingly enough.
Right. My trademark character was in this copyrighted little strip here.
Yeah, that's true. Trademark does double duty in a weird way too, in that it indicates the ownership of the mark itself and the content that appears underneath it, so or alongside it or what have you. But a copyright wouldn't. Copyright protection or copyright protected material wouldn't necessarily do something like that. The idea with a trademark is that when you see the name or logo or what have you, it's supposed to indicate whose product is this.
It's mine.
Yes, whereas using Times New Roman font and typing up your essay wouldn't tell us anything about who owned it or who wrote it. That's in the content itself. Copyright for that.
So there you have it. Other little lightning things before we go into some other stories are simple questions. So we have this runoff, and one of the elections is special, and one of the elections is like actually special in Georgia. And so let's say Kelly Loeffler.
Loeffler, yes.
Let's say she loses.
Let's say it.
Okay.
She loses.
And let's say she loses to Reverend Warnock.
Yeah.
And he becomes the new senator. Questions when. I remember in Arizona, not being an expert on this stuff, that after November 30th, Mark Kelly gets to be the senator because after November 30th, the Secretary of State, who happens to be a Democrat in Arizona, gets to swear him in. But what happens in Georgia? Every state's different in terms of the rules.
Oh, okay. Well, what happens, let's see. The Secretary of State was able to certify Kelly's election and send that to the Senate. And the Senate swore him in, I guess.
Well, the Senate swore him in, right.
Yeah.
But, it didn't have to wait until
until the beginning, right, because it was a special election.
Because it was a special.
Right. And so I think, I was musing about this on the way out and then during the break and then kind of getting excited at the prospect of, maybe the question of how Kelly Loeffler would react to an objection to the electoral vote on January 6th would have a lot to do with how the vote went on January 5th. But in all likelihood, they won't have counted and certified the vote by January 6th. So I'm guessing that in her case, with this being a special election, she serves until the successor is certified and sworn in, whereas with Perdue, I guess his term just ends on, ordinarily it would end on January 3rd, and I still don't know whether they're having their session on January 3rd or waiting for the 4th because it's Sunday, but if he loses his election, actually, whether he wins it or not, won't be in place to object or participate in the voting, I don't think, on January 6th, because he won't be certified or sworn in. Loeffler may still, by default, be in that position until they can certify Warnock and serve him in, at which point Loeffler's term would end. I think that's the way it would work.
So does that mean that like a third of the Senate is not in a position to object?
Unless they get sworn in, which they ordinarily would be. They'll be sworn in on January 3rd or 4th if they wait until Monday to do it, and then the vote won't be counted until the 6th. They will be in their second day of their new term so they'll be there to object. Yes, unless, of course, I don't know.
Well, if it's a close election and you don't really know who won, then that may take a while. Some of these things take a long time. I mean, these are some of the complications that Mitch McConnell was dealing with. In fact, he and leadership, Roy Blunt and others, were on a phone call with their conference, their caucus, whatever they call it.
Conference for them.
Trying to convince them not to object. I think they were talking to Rand Paul and Ted Cruz, the likable people, the likable caucus.
Right.
Don't be an asshole, and please don't. It makes us look bad. So, look, we are not the House. The House is going to object. We already know that. We already have people. Mo Brooks in the House is going to object to this and force the House to vote if he can. Right. And, of course, the House has Democrats, and they won't agree. Don't do this in the Senate. We'll be forced to vote against you and Trump. It'll make us look bad. It'll make it harder for us to win in 2022 will split our party even more than the Georgia specials did. So please don't do this. And, of course, he's talking to Republicans, so we have no idea if people like Ron Johnson are listening.
Yeah, he also has kind of overtly said he's considering doing that. There's an interesting twist. Matthew Rigdon, I think, suggested this to me the other day, and I don't think any Democrats are going to want to be involved in something like this. But if say, because it can happen, it would be ridiculous, but it could happen. Say that Donald Trump, who is still president, allegedly, at that point, begins trying in a few days before they install any new senators from Georgia, tries to push through more judicial nominees and confirm more people to the bench in the last days in office. Could they spend that time that way while they still have a Republican majority there? They could, but it would require an awful lot of work and coordination. I don't know that they are up to it. Reason I'll explain later. But Rigdon was saying, well, if they were going to try and spend their time that way, because, for instance, let's say they didn't want to confirm any Biden cabinet appointments, they could, in fact, waste their time that way. Rigdon was saying, well, what if a Democrat signs on to Mo Brooks's stupid objection just to force 2 hours of debate for every objection that's made in the Senate and kill the time that's left for the Trump administration to try to do something like that? I guess you could. You'd have a lot of explaining to do to your constituents why you signed on to such a thing, but maybe somebody could get away with it. I don't know how many hours you could actually waste that way. 2 hours per objection, but I see no indication that idiots in the House wouldn't object to every state just for the hell of it.
Yeah, so, in some states it don't exist.
Right.
Like New Nevada or New California.
Right. They filed amicus briefs in the Texas
and
case.
Therefore, they're real. It says right here on paper.
Right.
So
if it's delivered to Santa Claus,
I don't know if you caught the Saturday Night Live parody of Newsmax when they did Sportsmax.
I saw a bit of the
but
the video,
it was absolutely hysterical. If you grew up in New York and realized the Jets never win, basically what they said is, we're Jets fans and we're here to tell you the Jets have won every game. And I got 500 affidavits here from people who swore they saw the Jets win, which gives you an idea about the level of what some of this Trump stuff is at. So here's the background. Again, this is where polling comes in handy. This is issues polling, not horse race polling. But Fox News has a poll showing a bit of a honeymoon for Biden. 59% view the president-elect favorably versus 39% unfavorably. That's from the Pundit Roundup.
Okay.
And CBS News, most feel the election is settled. Trump voters disagree. Views expressed by Trump voters appear to be more than just the result of disappointment. When we offered people a chance to explain why they would not view Mr. Biden as legitimate and offered the option that they were simply not ready, few took it, saying instead it was because there was fraud or inaccuracies in their view. Trump voters also largely reject the idea that the president is himself making these claims simply because he's upset, with 85% saying he has hard evidence of widespread vote fraud because he says so.
Yes. Interesting point, though. And one of the great things about the issue polling, for weeks, everybody said, well, you just need to give them time to get used to it. So they asked them, do you just need time to get used to it? No, I'm serious. Wow. Okay.
Well, here's some of the numbers which are kind of funny. If the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, which they did, this is before that happened, Trump should, according to registered voters, concede. 75% say yes. Not concede, 25% say no. Remember, 23% supported Nixon when he left. So that's not surprising. That's about what you'd expect.
Yeah, you've said
about
that
a quarter of the country are nutcases.
True.
Biden voters concede. Trump should concede. 98% say yes, 2% say no. How do you get 2%? Natalie Jackson, the excellent pollster explainer, says, look, this is what you call measurement error.
Okay.
Right? Either they got the question wrong, they didn't understand the question, or whatever, but, it's really 100%. If the polling says 98-2, it's still 100%.
Okay.
Trump voters, this is the interesting part. Trump voters, if the Electoral College votes for Joe Biden, Trump should concede or not concede. 51% of Trump voters say he should concede. 49 say no. So it's not all of them. It's not even a majority who are being the dead enders here. So things do get better with time. And between Biden's popularity being above 50%, which Trump never got. He's got his usual honeymoon, 60% some odd voters, 59% in the Fox poll saying they approve of him. And the country basically telling CBS News they're more or less ready to move on, except for some hardcore Trump voters that aren't going to ever change. Then you've got Mitch McConnell in the Senate trying to calculate what it all means and how obstreperous should we be, how ridiculous should we be, should we go along with Mo Brooks and the idiots in the House who we hate anyway? Should we do? Well, the country's telling you they're really not behind this.
Okay.
So the Senate is saying, well, let's have a little sanity. Sanity beats sanity. Let's get in here and try to, fix things a little bit here.
Well, we'll see whether they can hold their conference in line. I have my doubts, but we'll see.
Yeah, I have my doubts too. But it's the Senate so far has really not been the House on this. They've really been quite different. And of course, it's the difference between trying to win in a gerrymandered district and trying to win statewide. So, it's the Georgia. Again, you go back to Georgia. Georgia tells you everything you need to know about American politics, interestingly enough. It's Brian Kemp and Brad Raffensperger running for re-election statewide versus the locals who are in a local gerrymandered district who think that, and are probably correct, that the way that they get reelected is to be Steve King in Iowa.
Yeah, we have plenty of replacement for him.
Right, because if they don't elect me, then I got a whole bunch of people standing behind me saying that they want the Confederate flag to be the flag of the United States, and who might argue with them?
And they inject themselves, interestingly enough, into these runoff elections in Georgia. Just we can stay on that topic. The two, I guess, at least two of the most. How should we describe it? They go the craziest, looniest new members-elect from among the freshman Republican class. Let's say Marjorie Taylor Greene and what's his name?
The QAnon caucus.
Madison Cawthorn, is that his?
Yeah, from North Carolina.
Yeah. And interestingly enough,
North Carolina 11.
Right. Now he was commenting on it. Now Marjorie Taylor Greene is at least from Georgia, so we'll have some input and something to say on what's going on. But Cawthorn made a video somewhere. I don't know whether it was on TV and it was a video clip or whatever. But insisting that there was something somehow inauthentically Georgian about Reverend Warnock, which was amazing for a North Carolinian.
Yeah, the so-called pastor, he said.
Yes. Right, and
who came down
this
here
fellow.
and pretends to be Georgian. Well, Warnock was born in Savannah.
Yeah.
And he's pastor at
you're from North Carolina.
Which is, of course, where Martin Luther King was.
There's a whole state in between you.
And where is Madison Cawthorn from? I think he's from Eagles Nest, North Carolina.
Yes, right. Hitler Hollow, North Carolina.
He's from Hitler Hollow, right.
I guess. I don't know. He's a wacko on his own right and doing everything he can to, glom onto the attention that comes for lunatics in the Republican Party. And pretty soon they're all going to come to the House floor without being searched for weapons or going through metal detectors. And P.S., they think all Democrats are vampire cannibals. So, we'll see how that works out.
Anyway,
that's relaxing.
Let me end this with a little down
Let's
note
end it
here.
all.
And that's about the pandemic and how that's going. The vaccine part is very good.
Yes.
Of course, the fact that it's just starting to roll out.
Right.
But Eric Tripple, excellent physician analyst, points out in just 1 month, the number of hospitalized patients increased from 60,000 to over 110,000 for the first time. A much quicker turnaround than the earlier surges with people coming in and going away. So the fact that the hospitalization is still growing means that many patients who are getting turned away who otherwise would have been admitted. So we are past the breaking point in the hospitals. It's really bad. Again, that tweet is in the pundit roundup. And the think piece on vaccines, I think, that is certainly worth considering is from Zeynep Tufekci, who often writes interesting things and takes a contrarian point of view and is often correct at it. She was right about masks early on.
Very good about this.
And this one is about vaccines and decision-making, and that is the trade-offs. A very important question lurking in the data chart that people are publishing on Moderna and Pfizer data And one goes straight to the heart of decision-making under uncertain conditions involving significant trade-offs. As can be seen, the incidence of COVID-19 drops off dramatically about 10 days after the first dose. However, the trial is designed to measure the efficacy of 2 doses, a primer and a booster. Okay, and we don't have the underlying data, but the first shot seems to have 65 to 80% efficacy in the full group, and the second shot 95%.
Used to be, we heard 50 the other day. This is better.
50 after the first week.
Okay.
60 to 80%, 65 to 80% after 10 days.
Oh, so just another 3 days.
So if you wait, because the vaccines are not effective immediately.
No.
So if you get 65 to 80 with 1 dose versus 95 versus 2 doses, what are the ethics and what is the epidemiology about giving everybody a first dose and vaccinating twice as many people?
Like Ron DeSantis said.
Yes, like Ron DeSantis said, versus
but he's a dope.
Doing 2. Now, Ron DeSantis is an idiot and doesn't understand any of this. And on balance, the epidemiologists and physicians I saw writing in response to this said, for the most part, it's probably better to do 2 doses, and I tend to agree with that. But, again, I think we talked about this on Monday. When you do Operation Warp Speed, what you do is you go so fast, you go right past questions like this, which should have been answered before you roll everything out.
Ordinarily, yeah. I don't disagree.
It's not because you're being bad. It's not because you're being unethical. But if you want to get it done fast, you don't have time to do an extra study to look at 1 dose versus 2 doses.
Right.
And so should you do that now? Or is it unethical given where we are at in the pandemic with the vaccinations rolling out and hospitalizations off the charts?
Yeah.
Certainly you want to get your healthcare workers too.
You'd like
but what
to.
about otherwise healthy people over 65? Should they just get 1 for now?
Well, given those numbers, I would strongly consider that. As I don't want to. You don't have to credit Ron DeSantis for anything to ask the question properly, but
or even let's say over 65s, people with underlying conditions, healthcare workers, essential workers get 2.
Yeah.
Otherwise, healthy population get 1 until we have enough.
That's not a terrible proposal. I would study that. I guess have somebody sit down and do the math and tell me, look, is it better or worse?
One of the questions
how long
that
it could take to get that second round
before you can judge is how long does immunity last with 1 shot versus 2? We don't know.
No, we don't. Yeah.
And so that's why it's unethical to change everything in the middle because you raised this interesting question.
Yes.
So it's important to ask these questions even if you don't have the answers.
Right. Abby has the answer. She's trying to tell us.
Abby's telling us that UPS is here with the birdseed for our Cardinals.
Oh,
so
okay.
Happy about that.
So are the Cardinals. That's good. And if they had the vaccine, it would be doubly good. But I guess not. Okay, so it's very exciting. It's good news for the birds.
It's good to think about this stuff.
Yeah. Well, all right. It would be really ironic for Ron DeSantis to turn out to be right about that. But I think he gave him a fair shake on Monday, saying, it might not be the worst thing in the world, and somebody needs to sit down and run the math. Don't make that decision the way DeSantis might without that math and without that science.
Yeah. Speaking of which, it's interesting,
theory.
But there are accusations this morning that the Florida Department of Public Health was sitting on deaths around the election to make it look better.
I believe that.
Because there were bunches of deaths, and then all of a sudden about the election, people stopped dying.
Oh, yeah. That's what they meant about COVID disappearing after the election.
Yeah, something like that.
Or they meant before the election and deaths from.
So, again, we have it's just so hard to tell what's going on in Florida. Florida has an excellent dashboard so you can look at things and see what's going on. But if the numbers feeding it aren't accurate, that doesn't help. DeSantis has been accused of manipulating data. He's been accused of firing his data scientists. He has wacky ideas, but at the same time, some of this is due to the normal. It's really hard to keep track of all of this. Florida made a decision early on that they're only going to count resident deaths, not snowbird deaths. So if you live in New York but come to Florida and then you go back to New York and you die while you're in Florida, you don't count.
Yes, they ship you back. Get counted in New York.
You count in New York. I don't know if New York counts you. It says, well, you died in Florida. Why should we count you? So
That's
I'm not sure,
What if there were
how well
ghost
that
deaths?
works. That's one of the things that the CDC does is coordinate the different state departments of public health so everybody's on the same page and you don't have these discrepancies trying to make one state look better at the expense of another.
Yeah.
And again, that's one of the reasons why you need an important and competent and functioning CDC. So, a lot of this is going to get sorted out, but the accusations at least are out there, and that's from the Orlando Sentinel, and I think it's well worth, following up and figuring out what the heck is going on.
Yeah. Well, that's a lot to think about, and I don't really want to contemplate. We don't have to maybe can it work out that can we say we don't have to contemplate whether Ron DeSantis is right? We can just contemplate whether Zeynep Tufekci is right instead?
We can do that.
Okay.
So here's the story. A mysterious gap in COVID-19 deaths appeared in Florida before the presidential election. That's the story. It's from the Orlando Sentinel. Okay. I'll send it to you so you can include it in the
okay, good.
roundup, or at least look at it if you wish to.
I do.
Astonishing pattern has emerged in Florida's COVID death tally, one that suggests the state manipulated a backlog of unrecorded fatalities, presenting a more favorable death count in the days leading up to the 2020 presidential election. Yeah. At issue is the state's handling of the lag between the date somebody dies and the date Florida reports the death. With minor exceptions, Florida quit including long backlog deaths in its daily count on October 24th, 10 days before the November 3rd election, and remained consistently including them on November 17th, 2 weeks after the election.
Yeah. Okay.
Result, the daily death numbers Floridians saw during that time are significantly lower than they otherwise would have been. That way you can claim you were winning.
I guess so. If you really voted based on that, I don't know. Whatever. As a factor, I'm sure.
Well, if you're an undecided voter and the day before the election, the headlines are highest death toll yet.
Yes.
That could affect the
election.
Right.
That's true. Right. Oh, okay. Very interesting. Florida's been weird about that. And, of course, that goes alongside the story of what's been happening to their data scientist who
exactly.
slash whistleblower. And
right. I don't want to dismiss her because Florida is wacky. But at the same time, everything needs to be or how they used to say in the movies, I won't print anything until I read it twice and see it 3 times.
Oh, well, yeah, we've been kind of taking her story with a grain of salt, but I got to tell you that Florida's official actions, as they're uncovered to us by the established press, they're offering an awful lot of room for theories that would otherwise sound kind of crazy.
Right. Well, let's end in a good note here as we get to the close of the hour. Here's another poll. Americans are growing less reluctant to take COVID-19 vaccine. This is from NPR.
Oh, good.
Now that federal regulators have authorized one COVID-19 vaccine for emergency use and appear close to authorizing the other, Moderna is going to be on Friday probably. Mm-hmm. Kaiser Family Foundation, or KFF, released a poll yesterday, showing a significant leap in the number of people saying they definitely or probably would get vaccinated. 71% of respondents to the late November, early December survey said they would, up from 63%. And the increase was evident across all racial and ethnic groups surveyed, as well as both Democrats and Republicans. Mm-hmm. Now, the importance here, of course, is the more people who actually get the vaccine, the better for your communities. But just like accepting the results of the election or Biden's positive rates in the Fox poll, as we get further away from Trump losing, this is going to get better. And when you have Fauci and when you have Biden publicly getting their shots the way Gerald Ford did during the swine flu stuff in '76, it's a boost to getting, the shot in your arm. And so the picture that people will see is a smiling Joe Biden or a smiling Tony Fauci rolling up their sleeve and getting a shot, as opposed to the usual pictures that they include with vaccine stories, which is screaming babies.
Yes, true. Will you be able to tell that they're smiling under their masks?
Right. I would love to see Trump get the shot and, look like a screaming baby. But at least it would help his own, followers if he did that. The past presidents will probably all get together, the living ones, and do it. Some of the dead ones probably too. And Trump probably won't be among them.
They voted. They might as well get their vaccine.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Well,
anyway, that's my roundup for today.
Excellent.
We'll come up with some stuff for tomorrow, but I'm just warning you in advance. And this is probably not great for your ratings, but the show's going to get a lot more boring because there's just not going to be insurrection and sedition every single day. Although we still got a lot to do between now and the 20th. Bill Barr is gone. Don't forget.
Yes.
And maybe you want to talk about what it means to have Jeff Rosen, a totally compliant attorney general, acting attorney general there, when Trump wants to prosecute Hunter Biden and Barack Obama and you.
Right. Me or the listeners?
Anybody.
Oh, okay. Well,
what's the protection?
Difference for me.
Who's to say he can't?
Nobody. It can absolutely happen. Okay. Well, that's a great teaser for our Thursday show. Here's a pop quiz for you. The Kaiser Family Foundation doesn't call itself the Kaiser Family Corporation, KFC, because of A, copyright, or B, trademark.
C, it's not on the menu.
Well, it could be. KFC has
that would be a trademark.
Yes, that's right. Okay, and so you're a lawyer now. Now you don't have to worry about playing one on the radio, or not.
I'm not a lawyer, but I try to learn from this show, and that's why I talk to you all the time. You teach me something every day I didn't know, and sometimes it's things I thought I knew and didn't. But again, the whole idea is to try to get a sense of process here, because we're getting back to the point where process and the rule of law matters. Take care, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
All right, we'll do it that way then. Instead of you continuing for another hour, I'm happy to break it up into pieces. Thanks, Greg. And time for our music that lets us out the door in about 30 seconds. So, okay. Lots to catch up on. I was very interested to find out about how popular watching Process on television actually was. Holds out some serious hope for us in retaining listener interest in the boring Biden period. We'll still have to explain to you, of course, what's happening and why it's happening, and probably fend off attacks from some about why other things aren't happening instead. We'll see you tomorrow. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. That line could probably be trademarked. Well, no, it probably couldn't be trademarked, because here's something else about trademark law, which you might find interesting. Too bad. It started and it's coming out now. I can't keep it in. It's very difficult to trademark simple phrases and common phrases like that. It would be very difficult, for instance, to, let's see, if you were to name your company ABC Corporation, for good reason, let's say, if you had three partners whose names began with those letters, trademarking the simple name ABC or ABC Corporation, you'd probably have great difficulty in doing, not only because there are probably existing trademarks out there that are similar, but because trademark confers all sorts of rights to enforce, they're enforceable against others. And if you were, for instance, interested in going out there and charging some sort of royalties to everybody who says the letters ABC in that order, that is something that they would never allow you to do. However, if you insisted on naming your company ABC Corporation and you spent some money, or didn't, developing a logo that was distinctive in some way to distinguish you and your ABC Corporation versus, say, any other ABC Corporation or anyone else in your business or what have you, if it was distinctive enough and identifiable enough, you could absolutely win a trademark for that, but you couldn't trademark ABC Corporation. Whereas, on the other hand, something else like, any company name that you can come up with might be eligible for trademark. I don't want to go into teaching a trademark and copyright class at this point, but I wandered into it. Anyway, let's go back to the politics and the other stories that I had on hold for you. Greg did mention, yes, that Trump is pissed at McConnell, and as it happens, I have open here from the very start of the show. I haven't updated or refreshed the Daily Kos front page since then, but Laura Clausen writing on that subject at the 9 o'clock hour Trump lashes out after McConnell accepts the inevitable and congratulates President-elect Biden. So if you're interested in that coverage there and finding out exactly how perturbed he really is, well, I'm just sort of taking a peek and see if there's some good reaction in here, but I think it might be below the fold what Trump actually may have said about this. Let's see. In response, late Tuesday night, Trump did a Trump, Laura puts it, tweeting a Daily Mail article, which we all know is a no-no unless you're doing so tongue-in-cheek, headlined, Trump's allies slam Mitch McConnell. Not him, right? Trump's allies slam Mitch McConnell for congratulating Biden, along with the commentary, Mitch, 75 million votes, a record for a sitting president. By a lot, he puts in parentheses. Too soon to give up. Republican Party must finally learn to fight. People are angry. So I guess now Trump himself, in fact, slams Mitch McConnell as well. I don't think he was looking to duck it. I love that he clings to that thing, too. It's a record number of votes for a sitting president. But that's such a stilted way of putting it, it almost inevitably leads you to the conclusion, well, but did the challenger get more? And yeah, he did. And so, well, okay. What can I tell you? Good luck walking around Mar-a-Lago in your slippers complaining about that. All right. Yeah, let's see. Oh, and here Greg has sent along his clip. The clip, I guess he had it ready for it, from Talking Points memo about the same thing. Trump tells McConnell, too soon to give up. So I guess whatever. He's going to encourage people to make these January 6th objections, and now you can all have more fun watching more process on C-SPAN. There'll be more people watching the electoral count vote than usual, I guess, although we have had some controversial electoral vote counts in the recent past, so you may have watched in 2001 actually, or after the 2004 election, or for that matter, after the 2016 election, just to see if anybody would object. And there were objections, I think, made by House members in all three of those elections, just none of them joined by senators in that case. Greg continues to add to the queue of stories here. Let's see, this one on the early voting in Georgia. Let's see what comment he's making. Another big day of early voting in Georgia. 167,000 people, presumably not dogs or Abby or anybody. 167,000 people voted yesterday, about the same as Monday, and up from 129,000 on the second day of early voting in October. Remember, Georgia just did this whole thing before when they were voting early in October for the November general election. More people then now voting on the second day of early voting in the runoff than voted in the presidential election early voting in October. What else? Are these your comments here, Greg? Or there's a lot of no's. Are these the ones pulled from the tweet thread from Nate Cohen? Yeah, I guess they're Nate Cohen's. All right, let's see. So all of these are Nate Cohen's comments, and here they are. Another big day of early voting is the first of them. No, I don't think this augurs for a higher turnout in the general. I don't think this augurs for a higher turnout in general, at least not yet. In the general election, are we saying? Okay. 98% of these voters turned out in the general. As long as that's true, this level of voting with respect to the general won't be sustainable. Okay. So is he trying to say that he doesn't think that, or he thinks that that's something of an anomaly, that there were so many people voting in this runoff, and although it exceeded the numbers in the second day of early voting in the general election, he doesn't think that overall more people are going to vote in the runoff than voted in the general. That would be awfully hard to believe. It would be a risky prediction, I guess, if you wagered anything on it anyway. It wouldn't be that risky otherwise. But I would guess that it's just people looking to get their voting obligation out of the way. They're kind of tired of going on with this. And people who are enthusiastic one way or the other about just getting to the outcome of the balance of power in the Senate already. So there's some extra excitement Anybody who was thinking of casting an early vote probably was in a rush to do it, and I imagine it might trickle off, but, we'll have to wait and see. It would be really exciting if there were even more voters. And I mean, the voter registration drives didn't slack off in any way. And of course, people made a good point immediately after the general election that a lot of people would turn 18, not millions, but lots of people would turn 18 in between the general election in which they would have been ineligible to vote and the runoff in which they would be eligible. And they're trying to identify those people and make sure that they come out. And people who, for whatever reason, might very well have wanted to vote in the general but were unable to would be sure to vote in the runoff. So we'll see what happens. Let's see. The rest of his tweet thread says, demographically, yesterday's voters were a lot like the second day of the early voters in the general, which was also true of day one's voters. And also, like day one, yesterday's turnout was at once much higher than the general and a tad more Republican than the same day. And that might be part of the effect as well. Remember that in the run-up to the general, there was an awful lot of Republican messaging saying, don't vote this way, vote day of in person instead. And that sort of backfired and then fizzled a little bit. And so maybe now people are saying, apparently those results count just like anything else. And it backfired badly on us. It may have cost us votes ultimately, cost us votes entirely. I guess possibly Republican voters who said, I'm going to wait and vote in person. And it just got more and more dangerous COVID-wise to go and do that. And then maybe they just backed out at the last minute. And now they know they can vote safely early by mail or at drop boxes. And despite all the efforts by Republicans, those votes will in fact count. So now they're joining in the act too. That could be, I think, accounting for some of the increase. Where else were we here? Let's see. As with yesterday, I don't really take much from the data so far, Nate continues, except that we have every indication of another high turnout election, with no party obviously poised to enjoy a meaningful turnout edge compared to what they had in the general. We'll probably have to wait until all of the early voting is done before we can try and make a comparison, since there are a lot of cross-cutting trends, but at the moment, I guess we won't ever be able to say anything particularly insightful about the electorate versus the general, which now makes me feel like we've put an awful lot of time into it and we're never going to say anything insightful. A few people are curious why I don't take much from the GOP share of the early vote being higher than in the general, and that's mainly because the turnout is so much higher. There's actually more to this thread. Dems won day 1/2, days 1 and 2, maybe, as they did during the general, and they netted more votes out of day 1/2 than they did last time due to higher turnout. And since the other weekdays of early voting were GOP and 88% of those early voters were general early voters, we'd expect higher turnout to tap into more GOP. Days 1 and 2 were the only weekdays that Dems won in the general. So if higher turnout keeps up on Republican-friendly days, and if the Republicans keep outperforming their vote share, then we could revisit this interpretation by the end of early voting. But for now, better to wait and see. Maybe just better to say nothing at this point. But too late, and we have spent 10 minutes saying something. Okay, let's see. What other stories do we have tucked away in pocket? There's an awful lot. Let's run through a couple of them. Here's one that popped up this morning. Trump's Mar-a-Lago neighbors initiate legal action to stop him from moving there when he leaves the White House, which is a good idea in general. And lots of people are going to be worried about being near Donald Trump for a lot of different reasons. This one would be known to you if you're a longtime listener to the show, and the consequences of it might be known to you as well. Look at this. This is from The Independent, the UK paper. Trump's Mar-a-Lago neighbors initiate legal action, right, to stop him from moving there when he leaves the White House. And the subheader sets up the problem. Trump signed, you might remember this, a deal in 1993 when he, I guess, had purchased and renovated the place and was ready to turn it into a beach club, right? He signed a deal in 1993 that bars him from using the private club as a permanent residence. Now, of course, it appears to be his intention to make it his permanent residence. He may try and find some weaselly way around the agreement. That's kind of what Trump does in life. But yes, this also raises another issue, though it might not raise actual legal problems for him. But if the neighbors are right in their interpretation of this 1993 agreement, and they are, I mean, it's a pretty simply crafted agreement. He's just not supposed to make Mar-a-Lago his permanent residence, period. Well, if that's the case, then we have this other weird issue, which is that Trump claimed to have left or renounced his residency in New York, probably, on a tax issue. And he was overt about that, and made his permanent residence Florida, at least for purposes of voting as well. And he made a big deal of it. And of course, he voted by mail, which he said was totally different because it was A, him doing it, and B, really absentee balloting, not voting by mail, even though they both are ballots that you mark on paper and mail in, and they use the same mechanism, and they're counted the same way and in the same batches, whether they are absentee ballots or mail-in ballots. It doesn't matter. Anyway, he applied for access to the ballot and had one sent to him based on his claim of his new permanent residence being Mar-a-Lago, which he's barred from doing by this agreement, but we don't know how it's going to work out in the cross currents in between this private agreement with his neighbors and state enforcement of state election law, and who knows how they're going to enforce any of this stuff, given that Ron DeSantis is the governor there, and we can have all sorts of selective choices being made about prosecution, etc. And we did have somebody point out it might not necessarily be illegal in Florida to vote from an address that, there are some legal or contractual complications extant, let's say, about your using that particular address for your permanent residence. It might not rise to the level of prosecutable voter fraud, but it is, in fact, it certainly fits in Trump's definition, the one he tosses around all the time, of voter fraud, having screamed his head off about everybody else casting illegal ballots for various reasons, but chiefly that voter fraud was what cost him the election. He voted based on an address that isn't and can't be his permanent residence. We'll see how Florida works that one out. Let's see. Is it a long article? Maybe we'll see whether we learn anything new from this, maybe about the names of neighbors who hate him and what their particular grievances are. Donald Trump's neighbors at his Mar-a-Lago private club in Palm Beach, Florida, are not excited at the prospect of him moving there post-presidency and have initiated legal action to stop him from making his permanent residence once he leaves the White House. The neighbors have delivered a demand letter to the town authorities of Palm Beach, addressed to the U.S. Secret Service, which said that Mr. Trump lost his legal right to permanently live at Mar-a-Lago due to an agreement he signed in 1993 when he turned his private residence into a private club. Mar-a-Lago was, in fact, originally a private residence, both that of the previous owner, which I think was Marjorie Merriweather Post, and for him. He kept it as a private residence for, I don't remember exactly how long, but a couple of years perhaps, in between his purchase of the property and this conversion in the early 90s into a club. In 1993, the president made a deal that bars any of the club members from spending more than 21 days a year in the club's guest suites or staying there for longer than 7 consecutive days. I don't know who's been enforcing that or counting, if anybody, but anyway, at that time, the town council was assured the president, which he wasn't president then, would not live at Mar-a-Lago. In the letter, an attorney for the Mar-a-Lago neighbors said that the town should notify the president that he cannot use the club as his residence, reported the Washington Post. The letter notes that this would avoid an embarrassing situation in case the president moves to the club and is then asked to leave. But the private club has been a favorite of the president, as he traveled there at least 30 times and spent at least 130 days there during his tenure. The letter highlighted disruptions such as clogged traffic and blocked streets due to Mr. Trump's frequent trips to the club. The president's history of ill will with the locals, such as his refusal to adhere to height limits for a massive flagpole that he installed, also doesn't work in his favor. The president has signed a document giving the development rights for the Mar-a-Lago Club to the National Trust for Historic Preservation, and under this, he agreed to relinquish his right to develop the private club or to use it for any purpose other than club use. Interesting. The controversy over Mr. Trump's future residence once he leaves the White House in January could be a headache for the U.S. Secret Service, which has to prepare for his security. Or not, depending on whether they feel like he has been helpful to them. I mean, they're obligated legally, and I'm sure they'll do a great job in doing it, but I wouldn't be surprised if there weren't a lot of Secret Service agents just not particularly interested in protecting him anymore, given that he's offered them no protection and, in fact, exposed a lot of them to COVID unnecessarily. Anyway, that's the end of this particular article. It does bring me back to the topic of the pandemic. I also saw this morning history buffs tweeting around the fact that I guess today is the anniversary of, in 1944, the commencement of the Battle of the Bulge, which was, of course, the enormously costly battle, I guess the biggest final battle of World War II, from, apparently according to the historical record, taking place between December 16th and about January 20th, 25th or so. I can't remember what the article that I read said about it, but apparently some 40 days of the Battle of the Bulge. And, if you're a history buff at all or have seen it depicted in the movies, whatever it is, you know about the historical importance of it. And I just thought it was kind of interesting. The tweet I saw being passed around is this one here from James M. Lindsay, a historian, a writer, let's say senior vice president at CFR, Council on Foreign Relations, I guess, .org, and writing here, the Battle of the Bulge, the last major German counteroffensive on the Western Front in World War II, began on this day in 1944. The Allies suffered heavy losses while beating back the surprise attack. Roughly 19,000 Americans died in the fighting. It's very interesting and insightful article from history.com that is attached to this, which is, I guess, what gave me the dates. I think I clicked all the way through it. Yeah, lasting 6 brutal weeks from December 16th, 1944 to January 25th, 1945. The assault, also called the pop-up, it gets in the way and doesn't want me to know about it. The Battle of the Ardennes took place during frigid weather conditions with some 30 German divisions attacking battle-fatigued American troops across 85 miles of the densely wooded Ardennes forest. So then going on to tell the story of the battle, which you may already be familiar with. I guess what caught my eye, because I'm just consumed with the numbers connected to this pandemic. 19,000 Americans died in 6 weeks in the Battle of the Bulge, which I think we all get a pretty good picture in our mind of what kind of losses that entails and how brutal this battle was and where it figures in American historical thinking. And, not mythology, but you get the idea of how it kind of approaches mythology, in terms of its importance and its place in American history and in the American psyche, which makes it all the more surprising to sit here and realize that during the next 6 weeks, you could see 3 to 5 times more Americans die just from COVID alone than were lost in the Battle of the Bulge. You can expect 75 to 100,000 people to die from COVID in the next 6 weeks. We are at the moment, in the last 7 days, the 7-day rolling average, et cetera, losing in the neighborhood of 3,000 people a day. 19,000 Americans killed over 6 weeks averages out, I think, to about 475 people, 475 Americans dying each day. 475 Americans dying from COVID today would be an amazing, a fantastic number, a drastic reduction in the losses. Put another way, at 3,000 people per day, we will lose as many Americans this week to COVID that we lost in the entirety of the 6 weeks of the Battle of the Bulge. And that's kind of surprising. I don't know if you've ever seen it exactly put that way, right? The Battle of the Bulge lasted 6 weeks, but I referred to it as a month. But it's considerably more than a month. But yeah, this is a low ball estimate, by the way. Apparently, by the way, over the entirety of the Battle of the Bulge, 19,000 dead, but 100,000 total casualties. Among American troops? I'd have to look at that history.com piece again. I think it was discussing the numbers there. But it continues on here to say over 15,000 cold injuries, trench foot, pneumonia, frostbite, etc. were reported as well. But yeah, if there were 100,000 total casualties, injuries, wounds, and losses on the battlefield or from any other cause during that 6-week period, we still may exceed that in the next 6 weeks anyway. At 3,000 people per day, you could be looking at upwards of 120,000 people in the next 6 weeks. And if things get worse than they are now in terms of our losses from COVID, it just outstrips it by that much more. You can't minimize. There's no minimizing the nature of the Battle of the Bulge, even if the numbers are not as big as COVID, and certainly not as, COVID's just not as dramatic, and people just don't realize how many people we're losing here. But we've already surpassed the total number of American combat deaths in World War II anyway. We will probably soon surpass the total number of all losses from all causes during World War II among service members. So we're still looking at some massive numbers here. So I don't know. Keep that in mind, I guess. Let's see. What about this here? As Greg messaged me another item here, this time via Twitter. The tweet of Andrew Goodman Bacon. What's going on here? A nice visualization, he sends, about the effect of staggered county-level mask mandates in Tennessee. And COVID deaths, and then citing the sources here. Is this Vanderbilt University, VUMC? Vanderbilt University Medical College? I don't know. I guess I should click on that and find out if that's exactly what I'm looking at here. Yeah. And a pop-up got in the way of that one too. Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Okay. So what's in the tweet here? A graph of COVID-19 deaths in Tennessee and adoption of mask requirements. Early adopter counties, 11 of them. Hey, you'll never believe it. Well, of course, they did show a spike in cases. Let's see. Oh, the x-axis here is what week of the year is it. So that's not super helpful. But anyway, early adopter counties, along with everybody else, saw a spike and then a dive considerably below where the late adopter counties are, and the never adopter counties, of which there are 67 in Tennessee, you'll be pleased to know, not only didn't recover from the spike, but went on to spike even more as the early and late adopter counties saw their numbers begin to drop. It's quite startling visually, and I guess I'll retweet it for those of you listening live, and I'll put the KITM hashtag on it for those of you who pick up on it later. So take a look at that. All right, back to the current news, and I think the end of the historical comparisons of casualties. Now we can stick to what's been happening in the last couple of days instead, as we return to the last segment of the Kagro in the Morning Show after this short break. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, and I've learned that I either need to update these announcements more often or stop saying that the announcements are brand new. What's not new is that this message, too, is a call for your support in keeping the Kagro in the Morning Show on the air. My thanks go out to all of you who do support the show through your donations. The stats say that Kagro in the Morning fans download our program about 2,000 times each weekday, but our donors make up only about 8% of our daily listeners. Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple to make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. If we're helping keep you sane during the Trump era, consider what that's worth. $1 a day? 50 cents? One thin dime? We do about 20 shows a month, so pick a number, do the math, and head to Patreon.com/KagroX to let us know. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Boy, there's a lot to catch up on again, so maybe a little bit of a run through some of the backlogged stories. We won't dive all the way in on all of them necessarily. One COVID detail story that I have not yet brought you, and I don't know if I can get all of them out in a row, but whatever. This one I thought was an interesting one. I have the Washington Post's report on this one rather than a local paper, but New Hampshire's Republican governor blasts anti-maskers after the Republican House Speaker of the state House dies of COVID-19. And in blasting them says, "Don't act like a bunch of children." So, yeah, that was kind of an interesting development here. Dick Hinch, that's really his name and not his condition. Dick Hinch, we shouldn't be speaking ill of the dead because he's one of them. Newly elected as Speaker of the New Hampshire House, shown here in the photograph here, wearing his mask improperly below his nose. I don't think that's what eventually did him in. There was another incident that likely did it. New Hampshire State Republican Representative Dick Hinch wept as he accepted a nomination as Speaker of the House. It meant a great deal to him. At an outdoor swearing-in ceremony with hundreds of his peers, including dozens without masks. "It is my honor to accept," he said on December 2nd at the University of New Hampshire, his voice trembling as he tried to choke back tears. "I am humbled by your support." Well, he was humbled by the disease a little later. A week later, in fact, Hinch, 71, was found dead in his home. The state's chief medical examiner found Hinch's cause of death was COVID-19. New Hampshire Attorney General Gordon J. McDonald, a Republican, by the way, announced on Thursday Hinch's death has left Democratic legislators demanding tests for representatives and their staff who attended last week's ceremony, and some Republicans castigating their colleagues for not following basic public health guidelines. At a news conference Thursday, New Hampshire Governor Chris Sununu, you may remember the name, Republican, of course, lauded Hinch as a tireless leader and described him as a close friend, calling his death a cautionary tale about the costs of failing to wear a mask. Sununu lashed out at other Republican legislators for flouting masks at large gatherings. For those who are just out there doing the opposite just to make some ridiculous political point, it is horribly wrong. Please use your heads. Don't act like a bunch of children, frankly. Other state Republicans were even harsher in their condemnation of their colleagues who had opposed health guidelines. "Those in our caucus who refused to take precautions are responsible for Dick Hinch's death," State Representative William Marsh, a retired doctor, wrote on Twitter. Hinch's death comes as New Hampshire grapples with its worst surge since the beginning of the pandemic. In the past week, daily reported cases rose 22% and deaths grew 20%, according to the Washington Post's coronavirus tracker. COVID-related hospitalizations also increased by 59% in the weeks leading up to his death. Hinch was at the center of a tense controversy between Republicans and Democratic state legislators about a lack of adherence to public health guidelines by Republican members. On November 9th, Hinch and about 50 New Hampshire Republicans were photographed at an indoor gathering to celebrate the election results, in which they gained the majority in the state house. None of them were wearing masks, according to the Concord Monitor. The Republican lawmakers gathered again on November 20th for an indoor caucus meeting at McIntyre Ski Area. That same day, the governor passed an executive order mandating masks. The New Hampshire Department of Health and Human Services later determined that at least 4 state lawmakers contracted the virus at that event. Sununu condemned the meeting, which had an open buffet, and where lawmakers disregarded social distancing guidelines and opted out of wearing masks, calling it poorly managed. The outbreak outraged Democratic members of the state legislature, who were furious that Hinch did not promptly inform them. The decision puts the lives of all members and staff of the House of Representatives at risk. And remember how large the New Hampshire House of Representatives is, by the way. Some 400 members in there for a small state. That, according to outgoing House Speaker Steve Shurtleff, the Democrat, a day before the swearing-in ceremony known as Organization Day. Only 270 representatives of the 400-member House attended the outdoor event on December 2nd, with most Democrats opting for an alternative virtual swearing-in on December 3rd to avoid possible exposure to the virus. Hinch sectioned off an area of the event for about 80 Republican lawmakers who refused to wear masks, according to the New Hampshire union leader. At the time, Hinch dismissed concerns over the outbreak tied to the ski resort meeting, contending that the infections were inevitable, given that most of the legislators are older and retired. We're experiencing higher than usual rates of infection in our state and the legislature, and its members are not immune from that. He at least recognized that. He said on December 1st, we are a citizen legislature, and it can be expected that our legislators are at the same risk as the citizens we represent. Interesting turn of events, then, to see Hinch die, and especially die at home. I guess he really just didn't see it coming. And whatever. I don't know what to tell you. They'll replace him. They've got plenty to choose from, but it's kind of an astonishing development. All right, let's see. What else have we got here that requires coverage? Not COVID related, but just in terms of, I guess, the ironic stories out there. I just want to throw this one out there. Oddball story from Louisiana. A unsuccessful Republican challenger in Louisiana's 4th congressional district, running as a Republican and apparently running as a big... Does it say that's in here? Does it acknowledge it in the story? I don't think so. But I had this story pitched to me as this guy... what's his name here? Ben Gibson. Oh, that's too bad. I know a kid named Ben Gibson here in our area, but that has nothing to do with him. 34-year-old Ben Gibson from Bossier Parish in Louisiana, I think ran in the primary as a Republican looking to, I think he got crushed in a 4-way race. But the incumbent Republican Mike Johnson won re-election eventually. But yes, Gibson garnered 6.3% of the vote, coming in last behind Democrats Kenny Houston and Ryan Trundle as well. But apparently he ran as something of a QAnon supporter, and so the great irony here is that he has been arrested for child pornography charges, which of course is one of the big underlying premises and justifications used by the QAnon folks for their activity. And it's getting more and more dangerous out there, whether they are overtly connected to QAnon or just some of the other wacko conspiracy theories that are taking root among the Republican faithful out there. That brings, I guess, up this other story from out of Houston, in which an ex-Houston police officer, taken in, I guess, by the QAnon weirdo theories, has found himself under arrest for stalking and then assaulting another, Houston area person who, for some reason, he came to, and there are some weird reasons for it, he came to believe was driving around a truck with something like 750,000 fake ballots in it. So he smashed his car into the guy, and then when they pulled over and the guy got out of his car, he pulled a gun on him and forced him to the ground and called the police and said, they're coming to arrest you because you're driving around a truck with 750,000 fake ballots in it as part of Biden's plot to steal the election. And, of course, as it turns out, that wasn't true. I guess you probably guessed that already. He was just a regular air conditioning repair guy with a truck full of air conditioning repair tools and parts and nothing paper at all, let alone 750,000 ballots. But as it turns out, it's quickly encapsulated here in the tweet about it by Will Sommer, who says this wasn't some rogue election fraud vigilante in Houston. This person was paid somehow $266,000 by a prominent group in the state run by a QAnon believer. The group's lawyer is the former head of the Houston Republican Party as well, reported here in the Star Tribune. I don't know why I've got the Star Tribune version of it, but I guess that's just what was available or at hand for Will Sommer here. But ex-Houston officer accused of assault in bogus fraud claim. Did I not put aside something more local in this? I guess I've got the ABC News report on it. Is that a local affiliate? Let's see. Yeah, I guess it is. Maybe we should go with their version of it. Alleged crusade to stop voter fraud lands former Houston Police Department captain in handcuffs. A former Houston Police Department captain was arrested and charged for running a man off the road and pointing a gun at his head in an attempt to prove claims of a massive voter fraud scheme in Harris County, according to a news release from the Harris County DA's office. Mark Anthony Aguirre, I don't know how he pronounces Aguirre, Aguirre, see how he does it, 63, arrested by his own Houston Police Department on Tuesday and charged with aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, a second-degree felony punishable by up to 20 years in prison. And this is an interesting way of putting it here from the Harris County District Attorney. He crossed the line from dirty politics to commission of a violent crime. I mean, you shouldn't be involved in dirty politics either. And we are lucky no one was killed. This from District Attorney Kim Ogg, OGG. His alleged investigation was backward from the start, first alleging a crime had occurred and then trying to prove it happened. That's weird enough. According to court documents, Aguirre, I don't know how he pronounces it, told police that he was part of a group of private citizens called the Liberty Center, who were conducting a civilian investigation into the alleged ballot scheme. According to this guy, he had been conducting surveillance for 4 days on a man who was allegedly the mastermind of a giant voter fraud scheme. He told authorities the man was hiding 750,000 fraudulent ballots in a truck he was driving. Instead, the victim turned out, as I said, to be an innocent air conditioner repairman, court documents said. So Aguirre, or whatever his name is, ran his SUV into the back of the truck to get the technician to stop and get out, according to court documents. You know the rest of the story from here. Let's see. His attorney says, I think it's a political prosecution. I really do. I crashed his car into the guy's truck and drew a gun on him and held him under false pretenses. His attorney says, he's got to say something, but he shouldn't be saying, I think it's a political prosecution. He was working and investigating voter fraud, and there was an accident. This is his line of the story. A member of the car, that's unusual way of putting it, a member of the car got out and rushed at him, and that's where the confrontation took place. It's very different from what you're citing in the affidavit. So his lawyer's story is, he was investigating voter fraud and got involved in an accident with somebody. And when he got out to exchange information or survey the damage of the accident, the guy in the truck rushed at him, and it was self-defense that he drew a gun on him. Weird thing that he called the police and told police that he thought he had ballots in the car, but okay. So this guy apparently never told the cops that he had been paid a total of $266,400 by the Houston-based Liberty Center, and the full name is the Liberty Center for God and Country, with $211,400 of that amount being deposited into his account the day after the incident. Wow, that seems kind of weird. And by the way, that's an awful lot of money. I mean, I guess you got to pay people a lot of money to take these risks, but again, another one of these, like, why do we get up and go to work in the morning? If you can make $200,000 being a QAnon lunatic, what are we doing? Anyway, the ABC News reporter here, Jessica Willey, asked Jared Woodfill, the attorney for Dr. Stephen Hotze, H-O-T-Z, Hotze, I don't know. That is the person, Stephen Hotze, whose name I think has come up in the past, is the president of this Liberty Center place. Asked them, does the Liberty Center endorse that? No, of course not. I'd be shocked if that's what happened. Anyway, they do say that Aguirre's company definitely worked for the organization, but with respect to what happened, gee whiz, I'm not familiar, but we'll be looking into that. What I found interesting about this was, in the last couple paragraphs here, a very short amount left here, where the case was investigated by the Houston Police Department and is being prosecuted by the Public Corruption Division of the Harris County District Attorney's Office, which is interesting all by itself, and it gets even more interesting in the next sentence. But Public Corruption Division, like, why not just your basic, you're a criminal and you smashed your car into somebody on purpose and then you drew a gun on them? They're actually investigating it as an offshoot of, oddly enough, of the defendant's claims that this was some sort of political crime. So maybe the lawyer isn't entirely crazy, or isn't the only crazy one in all of this, in terms of calling this a political investigation, because it is a political investigation. The Public Corruption Division is investigating this. This guy is just a straight up lunatic with a gun. You can just have the regular district. I mean, maybe it's better if the Public Corruption Division makes a high profile case out of it. I don't know. But then this next sentence here, Aguirre's claims of election fraud were found to be baseless, like all of them are. I just thought that was kind of interesting too. Like, they were found to be baseless. And in that respect, hey, it's no different from the other baseless claims that so many other people, including the purported president of the United States, are making on Twitter, et cetera, except this one resulted in violence. But hey, it's baseless too. But found to be baseless after a thorough investigation by the Houston Police Department and by the Harris County Precinct 1 as part of the Harris County Election Security Task Force. And then it ends by saying he's in jail, $30,000 bond, not yet posted. He worked for the Houston Police Department for 24 years and was indefinitely suspended after a botched raid outside of a West Side Kmart in 2002. So not a great ending for his police career either. But again, to circle back on this, prosecution being handled by the Public Corruption Division as though he were a politician of some kind, and then an investigation by the Harris County Election Security Task Force as if they essentially they took his allegations and the investigation that he said he was conducting like seriously. The Election Security Task Force had to spend time trying to figure out, well, was he really carrying around 750,000 falsified ballots in his truck? Of course not. It's obvious on its face. It's weird that they're even giving this case the time of day. I mean, I'm glad they're arresting him for the violence, but treating it as if, well, maybe he was justified in his violence seems to me to be a little strange. I'm sure they wouldn't characterize it that way, but that's the way it comes out looking. I don't know what else to tell you. All right, let's see. Other stories to get to. All right, I think that covers this thing. Here's an interesting item as well. The Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington, CREW, levels this allegation, not nearly as serious as some of the other weird things happening, but something definitely to keep an eye on government-wide during the transition. CREW sends complaint on CDC records destruction. That sounds worrisome. What was it all about? Let's see. Can we get through this thing relatively quickly? The CDC and Robert Redfield appear to have violated the Federal Records Act by instructing a CDC employee to destroy an email showing political interference by Trump administration appointees in scientific reports about the coronavirus, as you've always expected. This, according to a letter sent today by Crew to the National Archives and Records Administration. In response to the apparent violation, Crew urged NARA, the archives, to immediately take action to ensure CDC's compliance with the Federal Records Act. Reports of Redfield's directive first surfaced in a letter from Congressman Clyburn, Jim Clyburn, to Redfield and the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Alex Azar. The letter describes an interview with a career CDC official who testified that a Department of Health and Human Services political appointee demanded in an email that CDC alter or rescind truthful scientific reports he believed were damaging to President Trump. The official also testified that she understood that the instruction to delete the email came from Director Redfield. He's really way into trouble in this one. Do they get around to telling us who was the political appointee at HHS who demanded this? And I don't know if it's in this article here, but I'm wondering whether it's, what was his name? Caputo? Was that right? Who dropped out, or who resigned, but had like the psychotic episode just before doing so. Is that right? Let me see. Say we have the right name here. Michael Caputo. Yeah, I'm curious. It's not named in the article as far as I can see, but maybe a closer reading will tell us. Now I'm curious. Willfully destroying federal records, of course, is a crime punishable by fines and imprisonment. The Federal Records Act requires agencies to promptly report any destruction of federal records to the archives. Because CDC apparently failed to do so here, Crew acted swiftly to report the incident. And then, of course, an explanation from Executive Director Noah Bookbinder of exactly how bad and dangerous this whole situation is, and I think we can all agree with that. I don't want to give it short shrift, but I want to see what else is left in this story. The president and his administration are legally bound to preserve government records under the Presidential Records Act and the Federal Records Act. The FRA is a collection of statutes governing the creation, management, and disposal of federal records so that Americans can keep track of their government's actions. You all know about the importance of that. Crew had previously filed a complaint against Interior Secretary David Bernhardt and his staff for violating the FRA by purposely failing to document Bernhardt's daily schedule and meetings with industry lobbyists. In March, Crew also requested the archive's communication with the Department of Homeland Security, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, the EPA, and the Department of the Interior to ensure that they, too, are effectively communicating with agencies that have failed to comply with records-keeping rules. There's a link to read the actual complaint, and I wonder if it will give me any information about who in the HHS department initiated this. Let's see. Clyburn's letter identifies the CDC official interviewed as Dr. Charlotte Kent, chief of the Scientific Publications Branch and editor-in-chief of the widely famed Morbidity and Mortality Weekly reports at CDC. So a very important publication. So interference here, not only CDC-wide, but with the very important data in the MMWR. And I do think that's part of what Caputo was interfering in when he was still at the department. But even this letter doesn't go on to name Caputo. I'm curious about that. Maybe we can look it up. I'll move off of the subject rather than burning time looking that up. But I'm going to check that out and see if we can figure out whether it was Caputo or not, because I don't think he ought to be off the hook at this point. Let's see. Here's another item from Crew. This is so we'll close out with more Crew information here. How about this one? Here's the headline on their release. New records show Trump's DOJ rushed a no-bid contract for what? For more vaccine? For more therapeutics? No, for lethal injection drugs in a rush to make sure that they could execute a few more people before Trump left office, as this came to me from Patrick Snyder with the comment, and I think right on the money here, the depravity of the Trump administration in a nutshell, that this is what they're spending their closing moments on, making sure that they can give somebody a no-bid sweetheart contract to design something to kill people with that they could use in performing a few extra executions before making their way or getting their hats handed to them, I guess, and being kicked out of office. Reminds me also of something else that popped up in the course of the show from, I think I just saw Josh Marshall earlier tweeting about this and laughing at this CNN story and the way they put it here. Trump administration, I guess there are a few things that he still wants to accomplish that he really promised everybody he would get to. He didn't build that wall and he didn't do much of anything else. But what about not having enough water come out of the shower and you got to flush the toilets 10 or 15 times? That I'm definitely going to fix, right? And I guess it hadn't happened yet, but now he's working on it. Trump administration finalizes rollback of showerhead standards, punctuating President Trump's long-documented water flow grievances in the final weeks of his presidency. And Josh Marshall just tweeting the laugh till you cry emojis about long-documented water flow grievances. It's a hell of a way of putting it. And really, honestly, to be spending your the last weeks or days of your administration on water flow grievances is pretty demeaning all by itself. And, also good point being made by our friends over at Daily Kos, Jen Hayden, Scout Finch, saying, I can see why Trump wants these changes. As America is finding out, it is very hard to flush Trump. That's true. And, but Barb Morrill, a little more perturbed by the whole thing, just saying, seriously? This is, quote, punctuating President Trump's long-documented water flow grievances versus, say, his insane ramblings about showers and needing to flush the toilet 10 times. It was a pretty embarrassing stretch, these 4 years, really, for America. But, even more embarrassing when the world got to watch him spend, hours, enormous chunks of time on the shower. It doesn't work, and I got to wash my hair, and I got to flush the toilet 10 times, and no one knew what the F he was talking about the whole time. Anyway, just sort of an interesting closing activity. Not only that, but rushing out a no-bid contract for lethal injection drugs. Lots more, of course, that we didn't get to, and perhaps we'll save for tomorrow. I'll just tease you on this one. More news on Jenna Ellis and just how, spectacularly underqualified she is for the job she holds. And let's see, a couple of other interesting pieces as well. Oh, you know what? This one I think I might be able to squeeze in just in the last couple of seconds here. A possible explanation for why Trump would be okay with being politically forced into renouncing, at least publicly, his interest in cutting in line and getting early doses of the vaccine for himself and for other members, top members of the White House staff. Just happened to see this one go by the other day, along with the comment that maybe this explained this from, another name we'll have trouble pronouncing, Eric Feigl Ding, Feigl. I don't know what's Feigl. Eric Feigl Ding. We've called his name in the past. An epidemiologist by trade, and so a good source on information like this. He says, the CDC says that the new vaccine should be deferred for 90 days. Taking the vaccine should be deferred for 90 days if you have recently received convalescent plasma or the synthetic monoclonal antibody drugs from Regeneron or Eli Lilly, as the president did, to avoid interference during the first 90 days, I guess, of having that treatment take root and work its magic for you. So if you got the magic instant cure that he has touted and given to everyone else except for the low-level peons, as he sees them, at the White House who have had the misfortune to contract the virus, and the 97,000 or so people who out there have been waiting for him to deliver on his promise. We're going to break the 100,000 mark relatively soon, next couple of days on that one. But if you did manage to get a hold of the magic cure, guess what? The downside of it is that science recommends that you not take the vaccine until at least, I guess, 90 days after the administration of convalescent plasma or the synthetic monoclonal antibody drug cocktail from Regeneron or Eli Lilly. Okay, that may explain it. It might not just be his sense of fair play and or altruism at play here, and you knew that wasn't going to be the case. Time now, though, for us to hand the microphone over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, coming up next here on Netroots Radio. And let's see what's coming up on the show. White House Security Chief, that's who we were talking about. The guy who didn't get the free platinum virus treatment that Trump and Rudy got has lost his leg. You know about that.
NetrootsRadio.com.
Justice will tell you more.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Hey, how about that new acting attorney general? Apparently he's got an ugly record of defending racism. That's not so good. The Supreme Court said keeping people safe from COVID threatens religious liberty. No surprise there. And a federal judge approved a settlement between Brown University and student athletes who had challenged the school's decision to drop several women's sports.